I'm Madison, 26 years old, and I used to believe family meant unconditional love. I was living in what everyone thought was our family home, but there was a secret nobody knew. This beautiful Victorian house actually belonged to me, legally transferred by my grandmother before she passed. My parents and sister had no idea. They saw me as the family servant, the one who paid bills and asked for nothing in return. But when they screamed those devastating words and demanded I disappear from their lives, I realized it was time to show them exactly who held the real power. Before I tell you how I turned their world upside down, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe because this story will show you that sometimes the quiet ones hold all the power. Growing up, I genuinely believed we were the perfect family. My parents, Robert and Susan, worked incredibly hard to provide for us. Dad managed a small construction company while Mom worked as a school administrator. They weren't wealthy, but they gave us everything they could. My sister Veronica, 2 years younger than me, was always the shining star. She had this magnetic personality that drew people in, making friends effortlessly and charming teachers with her quick wit. I was the responsible one, the reliable daughter who never caused trouble. While Veronica focused on her social life and later her college education, I quietly took on more responsibilities. After high school, I delayed my own college plans to work 2 jobs, helping keep our household afloat. I worked mornings at a local bakery and evenings at a retail store. Every paycheck, I handed over most of my earnings to help with groceries, utilities, and Veronica's school expenses. The person who truly understood me was my grandmother Eleanor. She lived in this gorgeous Victorian house just 20 minutes away, and I spent countless summers with her. Grandma Eleanor was sharp as a tack, a former accountant who taught me about financial independence and the importance of standing on my own 2 feet. She'd say, "Madison, honey, never let anyone take advantage of your good heart. Kindness is a strength, but don't let people mistake it for weakness." During her final years, I became her primary caregiver. I'd visit every day after work, helping with groceries, doctor appointments, and household maintenance. My parents appreciated that I was taking care of Grandma, but they never offered to help. Veronica was always too busy with her studies or social commitments. When Grandma Eleanor passed away 2 years ago, the family gathered for the will reading. Everyone expected the house to be left to the family, as Grandma had always said. What they didn't know was that 6 months before her death, Grandma had quietly transferred the deed into my name alone. She made me promise to keep it secret until the time was right. "This house represents security, Madison. Use that security wisely," she had whispered during our last private conversation. The house was stunning, with original hardwood floors, stained glass windows, and a wraparound porch that looked like something from a fairy tale. It had 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, and a kitchen that Grandma had renovated with modern appliances while keeping its vintage charm. The property was worth easily $300,000 in our area. After the funeral, my parents and Veronica naturally assumed we'd all move in together to maintain the family home. I went along with it, paying all the utilities, property taxes, and maintenance costs while they contributed minimally. They treated it like their house, making decorating decisions and hosting family gatherings without consulting me. Recent months had been particularly exciting for our family because Veronica had landed what she called her dream job at a prestigious marketing firm downtown. She was making excellent money, finally contributing to household expenses, and my parents couldn't stop bragging about her success. "Our Veronica is going to be a marketing executive," Mom would tell anyone who'd listen. "She's got such a bright future ahead of her." I was genuinely happy for my sister. After years of supporting her education and career development, seeing her succeed felt like validation that our family's sacrifices had been worthwhile. Veronica would come home with stories about important clients, creative campaigns, and office parties. She bought herself a new wardrobe and started talking about getting her own apartment soon. Our family traditions continued as always. Every Sunday, I'd prepare dinner for everyone, and we'd sit around Grandma's old dining table sharing stories from our week. During holidays, I organized decorations, planned menus, and coordinated gift exchanges. My parents often commented on how grateful they were to have such a dependable daughter who kept the family running smoothly. Looking back, I can see the warning signs I missed. Veronica's increasing demands that I cover her car payments when she wanted to save money for clothes. My parents' growing expectation that I would always be available to help with whatever they needed. The way they'd make plans for the house without including me in discussions. But at the time, I interpreted their behavior as normal family dynamics. I thought I was being a good daughter and sister. The foundation of everything I believed about family love was about to crumble in ways I never could have imagined. The phone call came on a Tuesday evening in March. I was preparing dinner when my cell phone rang, showing Veronica's name on the screen. Instead of her usual confident voice, I heard sobbing. "Madison, something terrible happened," she choked out between tears. "They let me go today. The whole marketing department got cut due to company restructuring." My heart immediately went out to her. Losing a job is devastating, especially when you're building your career. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. Are you okay? Do you need me to come get you?" "I'm already heading home," she sniffled. "I can't believe this happened. Everything was going so well." I spent the next hour on the phone with her, offering comfort and practical advice. I suggested updating her resume, reaching out to her network, and researching other marketing firms in the area. "This is just a setback," I assured her. "With your skills and experience, you'll find something even better." When Mom and Dad got home, they were equally shocked by the news. Dad immediately started worrying about finances, while Mom focused on emotional support. "These companies have no loyalty anymore," Dad grumbled. After everything Veronica contributed to that place. Initially, everyone rallied around Veronica with love and encouragement. We had family meetings about budgeting and job search strategies. I offered to help update her LinkedIn profile and even suggested she could use some of my savings if she needed professional clothes for interviews. Within a week, Veronica had moved back into her old bedroom, bringing multiple suitcases of expensive work clothes, shoes, and accessories she'd accumulated during her successful months. She set up a makeshift office in the corner of her room and talked optimistically about her job search strategy. But as days turned into weeks, subtle changes began emerging in our household dynamics. Veronica stopped contributing to grocery bills, explaining that she needed to conserve her savings. When I suggested she could help with cooking or cleaning to contribute non-financially, she reminded everyone that she needed to focus her energy on finding a job. The first real red flag came during a family dinner about 10 days after she'd been laid off. We were discussing household expenses when Dad looked at me and said, "Madison, since you're still working, maybe you could cover Veronica's car payment this month, just until she gets back on her feet." I was surprised but agreed, thinking it was temporary family support during a crisis. What bothered me was how Veronica immediately smiled and said, "Thanks, sis. I knew I could count on you," as if my financial help was expected rather than a generous gesture. More concerning was when Veronica started hinting that she should have the master bedroom since she was dealing with job search stress and needed more space for her office setup. "Madison, you're barely here anyway with your 2 jobs," she said casually. "Wouldn't it make sense for me to have the bigger room temporarily?" I felt confused by these requests. I had thought that during family crisis, we'd all pull together and make sacrifices. Instead, it seemed like everyone expected me to make all the sacrifices while Veronica received all the accommodation. My parents started making comments that initially seemed supportive but carried undertones of criticism toward me. "We're so proud of how Veronica is handling the setback," Mom would say. "She's staying positive and focused on her goals. Madison, maybe you could help more with her emotional support." The strangest part was how they began treating Veronica's unemployment as if it was somehow more important than my consistent work. When I mentioned being tired after pulling double shifts, Dad would say, "At least you have job security." Veronica is under real pressure right now. 3 weeks into Veronica's unemployment, I started overhearing late-night conversations between my parents and sister that stopped abruptly when I entered the room. They'd be huddled around the kitchen table with papers spread out, discussing something in hushed tones. When I asked what they were planning, they'd give vague answers about family finances and future arrangements. The most unsettling moment came when I heard Veronica on the phone with a friend, complaining about living at home. "It's so cramped here with Madison taking up space," she said, not knowing I was within earshot. "I wish she'd just find her own place so I could have some room to breathe." That night, lying in bed, I remembered Grandma Eleanor's words about people taking advantage of good hearts. For the first time, I started wondering if my family's behavior was crossing the line from normal support into exploitation. But I pushed those thoughts away, telling myself that families help each other through difficult times. I had no idea how much worse things were about to become. By the 4th week after Veronica's job loss, the atmosphere in our house had shifted dramatically. What started as family support during a crisis had transformed into something that felt increasingly manipulative and one-sided. Veronica's job search efforts were becoming questionable. While she talked constantly about interviews and applications, I noticed she slept until noon most days and spent hours on social media. When I gently suggested she might want to set a more structured schedule, she snapped at me about not understanding the stress of unemployment. The financial demands on me escalated quickly. Beyond covering her car payment, I was now expected to pay for her gas, phone bill, and even entertainment expenses. "Madison needs to step up more for the family," I heard Dad tell Mom one evening. "Veronica supported this household when she was working. Now it's Madison's turn." This was completely untrue. Even when Veronica was employed, I had continued paying the majority of household expenses. But somehow, the family narrative had rewritten history to make it seem like I owed them more support. The emotional manipulation became more direct and cruel. During a family dinner, Veronica looked at me across the table and said, "You know, Madison, some people might see you as dead weight in this family. Always taking up space, but never really contributing anything significant." I was stunned. "I work 2 jobs and pay most of the bills here," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. "Money isn't everything," Mom interjected, taking Veronica's side. "Your sister has always had more ambition and potential. Maybe you should focus on being more supportive instead of keeping score." These conversations became increasingly frequent and harsh. I was criticized for working too much and not being emotionally available, but also criticized when I tried to take time off to spend with family. Nothing I did seemed right anymore. The breaking point accelerated when my parents started making demands about my work schedule. "Madison, Veronica has an important interview Tuesday afternoon," Dad announced. "You need to call in sick so you can drive her and wait in case she needs moral support afterward." When I explained that I couldn't afford to miss work and suggested Veronica could drive herself or take public transportation, the response was explosive. "This is exactly the kind of selfish attitude that holds this family back," Mom said angrily. "Your sister is trying to rebuild her career, and you're worried about one day of work at some bakery." The contempt in her voice when she said some bakery cut deep. These were the same jobs I'd been working to support our family for years. Jobs they'd previously appreciated when the paychecks helped pay their bills. Veronica's behavior toward me became increasingly cruel and entitled. She started treating me like household staff, leaving messes for me to clean and expecting me to do her laundry along with mine. When I asked her to contribute to housework, she responded, "I'm dealing with career stress." "You've never had real career pressure, so you don't understand what I'm going through." The isolation tactics became more obvious. Family decisions were made without including me, even about the house where I was paying all the maintenance costs. They planned renovations to help Veronica feel more comfortable during her job search, without asking my opinion or considering my financial contribution. Most painfully, they began making comments about my future that excluded me from the family entirely. Once Veronica gets back on her feet, she'll probably want to start fresh somewhere new, Dad mentioned casually. Madison, you should think about finding your own place soon. You can't live at home forever. The irony was devastating. They were talking about kicking me out of the house that I legally owned, while continuing to expect me to pay all the expenses for their benefit. My work performance started suffering from the stress and sleep deprivation. My boss at the bakery noticed I seemed distracted and tired. "Everything okay at home, Madison?" she asked with genuine concern. I couldn't bring myself to explain the situation because it sounded too unbelievable. The cruelest moment came during what I thought would be a family meeting about our financial situation. Instead, it turned into an intervention about my negative attitude and lack of family commitment. "Madison, we're worried about you," Mom began, with false sweetness in her voice. "You seem resentful lately, and it's affecting the whole family dynamic." Veronica jumped in with practiced precision. "Maybe if you disappeared for a while, there would be more resources and emotional energy for people who are actually trying to improve their lives. Some of us have real potential, you know." Dad nodded in agreement. "Your sister is going through a difficult transition, and frankly, your presence here seems to be adding stress rather than support." I sat there in complete shock, realizing that the family I had sacrificed everything for saw me as nothing more than a financial resource and emotional burden. They had rewritten our entire history to justify treating me as disposable. That night, I made a discovery that confirmed my worst suspicions. While cleaning the kitchen, I found a stack of job applications that Veronica had printed but never completed or sent. She wasn't even trying to find work, just putting on a performance to maintain her victim status while everyone catered to her needs. When I tried to confront my parents about this discovery, they dismissed my concerns entirely. "Job searching is harder than you understand," Mom said. "Veronica is being strategic about her applications." I realized that no amount of evidence would change their minds because they didn't want to see the truth. They had chosen their favorite, and I was simply the convenient scapegoat for all their problems. The stage was set for the final confrontation that would change everything. The moment that shattered my world came on a Friday evening in late April. I had just finished a double shift, working the morning at the bakery and covering an extra evening shift at the retail store for a coworker who called in sick. I was exhausted, my feet ached, and all I wanted was to come home to some peace and quiet. Instead, I walked into what was clearly a planned family meeting that had been deliberately scheduled while I was at work. My parents and Veronica were sitting around the dining room table with papers spread out in front of them, looking like a board of directors about to deliver bad news to an underperforming employee. "Madison, perfect timing," Dad said, though his tone suggested my arrival was anything but perfect. "We need to have a serious family discussion." I set down my purse and work bag, immediately sensing that something significant was about to happen. The formal way they were sitting, the papers on the table, Veronica's barely concealed smug expression, it all felt like a setup. "We've been talking about the living situation here," Mom began, using the same tone she probably used when disciplining students at school. "And we've come to some important decisions about what's best for everyone." My stomach dropped. "What kind of decisions?" Veronica leaned forward, clearly enjoying her moment. "We've decided that you need to move out, Madison. This arrangement isn't working anymore." I stared at them in disbelief. "Move out? But I pay most of the bills here. This is my home too." Dad cleared his throat. "Madison, you're 26 years old. It's time for you to be independent. We need Veronica to have her space back so she can focus on rebuilding her career without distractions." "Distractions?" I repeated, my voice rising. "I work 2 jobs to help support this household. How am I a distraction?" "That's exactly the problem," Mom said, shaking her head. "You've made yourself too comfortable here, treating this like it's your house instead of contributing as a grateful family member. The audacity of that statement took my breath away. I had been contributing more than anyone else, financially and practically, for years. I've supported you financially and emotionally for years, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. When Grandma was sick, I took care of her. When bills were tight, I worked extra shifts. When Veronica needed help with college expenses, I gave up my own education plans. Veronica rolled her eyes dramatically. And there it is, the martyr complex. Madison, you chose to work those jobs. Nobody forced you. But now your negative energy is affecting my ability to move forward with my life. My negative energy? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Yes, Dad said firmly. We've been talking, and honestly, we think you've become too dependent on this family arrangement. You need to learn to stand on your own 2 feet. The projection was staggering. Veronica hadn't worked or contributed anything for over a month, but I was the one who was too dependent. Where exactly am I supposed to go? I asked, still hoping this was some kind of bizarre intervention that would end with reasonable discussion. That's not really our problem to solve, Veronica said with a cold smile. You're an adult. Figure it out. I looked at my parents, waiting for them to correct her cruel dismissal, but they remained silent. Mom even nodded slightly in agreement. We're giving you 1 week to find alternative arrangements, Dad announced, as if he was doing me a favor. That should be plenty of time for someone with 2 jobs to find a rental. 1 week. I was incredulous. To find an apartment, come up with a security deposit, and move all my belongings? Maybe if you had been more responsible with your money instead of just coasting along here, you'd have savings for situations like this, Mom said, with breathtaking hypocrisy considering how much of my income had gone toward supporting them. Veronica leaned back in her chair, clearly savoring my distress. Honestly, Madison, why can't you just disappear already? Nobody wants you here. You're like this dark cloud hanging over the family, bringing everyone down with your boring job problems and lack of ambition. The words hit me like physical blows. This was my sister, someone I had loved and supported unconditionally, telling me that my existence was unwanted. We've supported you long enough, Dad continued, piling on. It's time for you to support your sister for once. She has real potential, a real future ahead of her. You're just holding everyone back. I tried one last desperate appeal to their sense of fairness. I've sacrificed everything for this family. I delayed my own education, worked multiple jobs, took care of Grandma, paid bills you couldn't cover. How can you call that being supported by you? That's what family does, Mom said dismissively. But Veronica has actual career prospects and goals. Your job at a bakery isn't exactly a career path. The contempt in their voices was unmistakable. They had completely rewritten our family history, transforming my years of sacrifice into freeloading and my sister's month of unemployment into some kind of noble struggle that deserved everyone's support. Then came the words that would haunt me forever. Just go die somewhere else and stop being such a burden. Dad shouted, his face red with anger. We're tired of carrying your dead weight. The room fell silent after his explosion. Even Veronica looked slightly surprised by the viciousness of his words, though she quickly recovered and smirked. Mom made no effort to correct him or apologize for the cruelty. Instead, she simply said, "You have 1 week, Madison. We think it's best if you start packing tonight." I stood there in that doorway, looking at the 3 people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, and felt something fundamental shift inside me. The family I had believed in, sacrificed for, and loved with everything I had was nothing more than an illusion. They saw me as disposable, useful only as long as I served their needs. But as I turned to walk toward my room, something else stirred within me. A memory of Grandma Eleanor's voice, reminding me that I was stronger than I knew. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I remembered the papers in my dresser drawer that would change everything. They wanted me to disappear from their lives. I was about to grant their wish in a way they never could have imagined. I walked to my bedroom in a daze, their cruel words echoing in my mind. Go die somewhere else and stop being such a burden. The people who were supposed to love me unconditionally had just told me they wished I would disappear permanently from their lives. I sat on my bed, staring at the dresser drawer where I had kept Grandma Eleanor's papers for the past 2 years. With trembling hands, I pulled out the folder containing the property deed, transfer documents, and legal paperwork that proved this house belonged to me, not them. As I spread the documents across my bed, the full magnitude of the situation became crystal clear. My parents and Veronica had just demanded that I move out of my own house. They had threatened me, insulted me, and told me to die, all while living under my roof and benefiting from my financial support. The property transfer document was straightforward and legal. 6 months before her death, Grandma Eleanor had transferred the deed into my name alone. She had paid all the associated fees and taxes, making sure everything was completely legal and binding. Her attorney had explained that she wanted to ensure I would always have security, knowing how much I had sacrificed for the family. "Madison, honey," I could hear her voice in my memory. "This house represents more than just shelter. It represents independence and the power to make your own choices. Don't let anyone ever make you feel powerless when you're actually holding all the cards." I called the family attorney who had handled the original transfer, Mr. Patterson, who had been Grandma's lawyer for 30 years. Even though it was evening, he answered his personal cell phone when he saw my name. "Madison, how are you doing? Is everything all right?" I explained the situation as calmly as I could, asking him to confirm my legal rights as the property owner. "Madison, you are the sole legal owner of that property," he said firmly. "You have every right to determine who lives there and under what conditions. Your parents have no legal claim whatsoever to that house. If you want them to leave, you can give them legal notice and they'll have to comply or face eviction proceedings. What about the fact that they've been living there and consider it their family home? Legally, that's irrelevant," he explained. "They've been living there as your guests, whether they realized it or not. Property ownership is based on legal documentation, not assumptions or family expectations." Mr. Patterson offered to prepare official 30-day notice documents if I decided to proceed. He also explained that as the property owner, I was entitled to charge rent if I chose to let them stay, but I was under no obligation to house them at all. After hanging up, I sat in my room contemplating the cosmic irony of my situation. The people who had just told me to get out and die had no idea they were living in my house, dependent on my generosity for shelter. I spent the weekend thinking through my options. I could reveal the truth immediately and watch them scramble to apologize. I could demand rent from them going forward. I could give them notice to leave and take control of my own life and property. But as I reflected on years of their treatment toward me, I realized this moment was about more than just property ownership. It was about self-respect, dignity, and refusing to accept abuse from people who clearly didn't value me as a person. The plan that formed in my mind wasn't about revenge. It was about justice and self-preservation. They had told me to disappear from their lives, and I was going to grant their wish. But I would do it on my terms with the full truth revealed. I spent Monday morning at Mr. Patterson's office, reviewing the legal documents and having him prepare official notices. He also provided me with copies of everything, so I would have backup documentation ready. "Madison, I knew your grandmother well," he said as we finished the paperwork. "She would be proud of you for standing up for yourself. She always worried that your family took advantage of your generous nature." Tuesday through Thursday, I continued working my regular shifts, acting completely normal around my family. They assumed I was quietly accepting their demands and looking for apartments. Veronica made several snide comments about hoping I'd find somewhere far away, while my parents discussed their relief at having resolved the living situation. What they didn't notice was my inner transformation. Years of Grandma Eleanor's wisdom were finally taking hold. I was no longer the desperate-to-please daughter seeking family approval. I was a property owner who had been disrespected and mistreated by ungrateful tenants. Friday evening, I prepared for the final family dinner in our old dynamic. I cooked a meal, set the table carefully, and placed a legal-size manila envelope in the center of the dining table like a centerpiece. My parents and Veronica gathered around the table, chatting casually about their plans for the house once I was gone. Veronica had already started talking about redecorating her space and using my former bedroom as an office. As we started eating, I maintained calm conversation, asking about their day and discussing mundane topics. The envelope sat untouched in the center of the table, but nobody seemed curious about it. Finally, as we finished the main course, I decided it was time. "Before I leave next week, there's something important we need to discuss," I said quietly. They all looked at me with mild interest, probably expecting final moving arrangements or a schedule for removing my belongings. "Don't you think it's important to know who actually owns this house?" The question hung in the air for a moment. Then Veronica laughed. "What kind of question is that?" "It's the family house. Grandma left it to all of us." "Actually," I said, reaching for the envelope. She didn't. I pulled out the property deed and placed it in front of them. "Grandma Eleanor transferred this house into my name alone 2 years ago. I am the sole legal owner." The transformation in their expressions was immediate and dramatic. Dad grabbed the document, scanning it quickly while Mom leaned over his shoulder. Veronica's face went from amusement to confusion to dawning horror. "This has to be fake," Veronica said, her voice rising. "You're lying." I placed the additional legal documents on the table: transfer paperwork, tax records, attorney correspondence, all clearly showing my name as the property owner. "You told me to disappear from your lives," I said calmly. "You told me to go die somewhere else because I was a burden. Well, I'm granting your wish." I pulled out the 30-day legal notice that Mr. Patterson had prepared. "You have 30 days to find alternative housing arrangements. As the property owner, I'm terminating your residency here." The silence that followed was deafening. Dad's face cycled through several colors as he processed the magnitude of their mistake. Mom's mouth opened and closed without making sounds. Veronica looked like she had been slapped. "You can't do this." Veronica finally screamed. "This is our home." "Actually, it's my home," I replied. "And you just spent the last month telling me how much you wanted me gone. Congratulations, you're getting your wish." The power dynamic had shifted completely, and we all knew it. The family that had just told me to die and disappear was now at my mercy, completely dependent on my goodwill for shelter. They wanted me gone, but I was taking my house with me. The atmosphere around that dinner table transformed from casual family conversation to stunned silence in a matter of seconds. My parents and Veronica stared at the legal documents spread before them, their faces showing a progression of disbelief, panic, and dawning realization. Dad was the first to recover his voice, though it came out as more of a croak. "Madison, this can't be real. There has to be some mistake." "There's no mistake," I said calmly, my voice steadier than I had felt in months. "Grandma Eleanor made this decision deliberately. She wanted me to have security and independence." Veronica snatched the property deed from Dad's hands, studying it with desperate intensity as if she could will the words to change. "This is impossible. Grandma said she was leaving the house to the family." "She said she was leaving it to family," I corrected. "She chose which family member would inherit it." Mom finally found her voice, though it was shaking. "Madison, honey, surely you're not serious about this notice. We can work something out. We're family." The word family coming from her lips, after what they had put me through, was almost laughable. "Funny how I'm suddenly family again now that you need something from me," I observed. "Last week, you told me to go die somewhere else because I was a burden." "That was just stress talking," Dad said quickly, reaching across the table toward me in a pleading gesture. "We didn't mean those things. You know we love you." "Do I?" I asked. Because loving family members don't usually tell each other to disappear permanently. They don't treat each other like financial servants or emotional punching bags. Veronica was frantically shuffling through the legal papers, looking for any loophole or error. "There has to be something wrong with this paperwork. Maybe Grandma wasn't mentally competent when she signed it. Maybe you manipulated her." Her desperation was almost pitiful, but I felt no sympathy after weeks of her cruelty. Mr. Patterson can confirm that Grandma was completely competent and made this decision freely. She was protecting me from exactly this kind of treatment. Madison, please, Mom said, tears starting to form in her eyes. Where are we supposed to go? We can't afford market rent on a place this size. The irony was staggering. For years, I had been paying market rate expenses on this house while they contributed minimally. Now they were worried about affording housing costs they should have been paying all along. That's not really my problem to solve, I said, echoing Veronica's exact words from the previous week. You're adults. Figure it out. Dad tried a different approach, attempting to sound authoritative. Madison, this is ridiculous. We've been living here as a family for 2 years. You can't just kick us out because of some paperwork technicality. It's not a technicality, Dad. It's legal ownership. And you're not being kicked out because of paperwork. You're being asked to leave because you told me you wanted me gone from your lives. Veronica slammed her hand on the table, making the dishes rattle. This is insane. You can't destroy our family over some stupid fight. I'm not destroying anything, I replied calmly. You destroyed our family dynamic when you decided I was worthless and expendable. I'm simply responding to your clearly expressed wishes. The next hour was a masterclass in manipulation tactics as they tried every possible approach to change my mind. They attempted guilt, claiming I was being cruel to people who had raised and supported me. They tried bargaining, offering to treat me better if I'd reconsider. They even attempted threats, suggesting I'd regret breaking up the family. But what they couldn't do was deny the truth of how they had treated me. Every argument they made only reinforced my decision. Madison, be reasonable, Mom pleaded. We made some mistakes, but family forgives family. We can start over. You told me to die, I said quietly. You called me deadweight and said nobody wanted me around. Those weren't mistakes born from stress. Those were your true feelings finally being expressed. Dad tried one last desperate appeal. What about all the years we supported you? Doesn't that count for something? What years? I asked. The years when I worked 2 jobs to help pay your bills? The years when I took care of Grandma while you were too busy? The years when I delayed my own education to support Veronica's? When exactly did you support me? Veronica had been uncharacteristically quiet for several minutes, studying the legal notice with growing panic. Finally, she looked up with tears in her eyes, all her earlier smugness completely gone. Madison, I'm sorry, okay? I was stressed about being unemployed, and I took it out on you. But you can't make us homeless over this. I'm not making you homeless, I said. I'm giving you exactly what you asked for. You wanted me out of your lives. I'm leaving, and I'm taking my house with me. But where will we go? Mom asked desperately. The same place you expected me to go when you gave me a week's notice, I replied. You'll find rentals, apply for apartments, pay security deposits, and figure it out like any other adults. The beautiful irony wasn't lost on any of us. They had expected me to instantly solve a housing crisis they had created with 1 week's notice and minimal resources. Now they were facing the exact same situation, except they had 30 days and each other for support. We can't afford market rent, Dad admitted quietly. Then you'll need to find jobs, I said. Veronica, this might be excellent motivation for your job search. As the evening wore on, their tactics shifted from manipulation to bargaining. They offered to pay rent if I'd let them stay. They promised to treat me better and include me in family decisions. They even suggested we could all live together as equals, splitting expenses fairly. But I had crossed a bridge that couldn't be uncrossed. I had seen their true feelings about me, and there was no going back to pretending we were a loving family. You have 30 days, I said finally, standing up from the table. Mr. Patterson has all the legal documentation if you want to verify anything. I'll be staying elsewhere during the transition period. As I gathered the papers and headed toward my room to pack some essentials, I heard Veronica break down completely behind me, sobbing about how unfair everything was. The 3 people who had told me to disappear were about to learn what disappearing actually meant. 3 months later, I was sitting on the wraparound porch of my house, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. The silence was peaceful, broken only by birds singing in the old oak tree Grandma Eleanor had planted decades ago. The house felt different now that it was truly mine. I had spent weeks making small changes that reflected my personality rather than family compromises. Fresh paint in colors I loved, new furniture arranged the way I wanted, photos of friends and memories that made me smile rather than obligation shots of family gatherings. The transition hadn't been easy emotionally. Choosing yourself over family approval is one of the hardest decisions anyone can make, even when that family has shown you their true nature. I spent several weeks in therapy, working through the grief of losing the family I thought I had and processing the years of manipulation I hadn't fully recognized. Dr. Martinez, my therapist, helped me understand that what I had experienced was a form of financial and emotional abuse. You were trained from an early age to prioritize everyone else's needs above your own, she explained. Breaking that pattern takes courage and self-respect. The support that emerged from unexpected places surprised me. My coworkers at both jobs rallied around me when they learned what had happened. Sarah from the bakery invited me to family dinners with her husband and children. Marcus from the retail store introduced me to his friend group, people who valued kindness and authenticity. I always wondered why someone as capable as you seemed so stressed all the time, Sarah told me one evening. Now it makes sense. You were carrying emotional weight that wasn't yours to carry. My work performance improved dramatically without the constant family stress. Within 6 weeks of gaining my independence, I received a promotion to assistant manager at the bakery. The owner, Mrs. Chen, had been watching my leadership skills and work ethic for months. "Madison, you have management potential," she said during my review. "I'd like to help you develop that, maybe even consider partial ownership someday if you're interested in the business side." For the first time in years, I had space to consider my own goals and dreams. I enrolled in online business courses, thinking about eventually opening my own bakery or cafe. The financial stability of owning my home outright gave me freedom to take calculated risks with my career. The legal transition had proceeded smoothly but coldly. My family found a small 3-bedroom apartment across town that strained their combined resources. Dad had to take on extra construction projects, Mom picked up evening tutoring work, and Veronica finally found a part-time job at a local marketing agency, making significantly less than her previous position. They attempted contact several times during those first months. Dad called to update me on their living situation, clearly hoping I'd feel guilty and invite them back. Mom sent long text messages about missing our family dinners and hoping we could reconcile. Veronica alternated between apology messages and angry accusations, depending on her mood. I didn't respond to any of it. Dr. Martinez had helped me understand that maintaining no contact was essential for my healing process. You can't rebuild your sense of self-worth while still engaging with people who consistently undermine it, she explained. Through therapy, I realized how much of my identity had been wrapped up in being useful to others. Learning to value myself for who I was, rather than what I provided, was a daily practice that gradually became more natural. I started dating someone wonderful, a teacher named James who I met through Sarah's family. What struck me most about James was how he reacted when I told him my story. Instead of suggesting I should forgive and reconcile with my family, he listened carefully and said, "It sounds like you made a brave decision to protect yourself." "Sometimes people think blood family is everything," he said during one of our early conversations. "But I believe we're allowed to choose relationships that add value to our lives rather than drain them." 6 months after the dinner table confrontation, I received an unexpected letter from Veronica. Instead of manipulation or anger, it was a genuine apology acknowledging how poorly she had treated me and accepting responsibility for her actions. "I've been in therapy trying to understand why I felt so entitled to your support while giving nothing back," she wrote. I'm learning about narcissistic behavior patterns and recognizing how I exploited your generosity. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know I understand now that what we did was wrong. I appreciated the apology, but wasn't ready for contact. Perhaps someday we might rebuild some kind of relationship, but it would have to be entirely different from what we'd had before. A year later, I hosted my first Thanksgiving dinner for my chosen family of friends. Sarah and her husband brought their children. Marcus came with his partner. James contributed his famous stuffing recipe, and Mrs. Chin surprised everyone by joining us with homemade dumplings. As we sat around Grandma Eleanor's dining table, sharing stories and laughter, I felt a deep sense of peace. These people valued me for who I was, not what I could provide them. They celebrated my successes and supported me through challenges without keeping score or expecting payment. What are you most grateful for this year? James asked as we went around the table sharing thanks. I'm grateful for learning that loving yourself isn't selfish, I said. It's necessary for any authentic relationship. Looking back, I understand that my family's betrayal was actually a gift in disguise. It forced me to discover my own strength and taught me the difference between being needed and being valued. The house that Grandma Eleanor left me wasn't just property, it was a foundation for building the life I actually wanted rather than the life others expected me to live. I learned that blood doesn't automatically create family bonds, and sometimes the strongest thing you can do is choose yourself over people who treat you as disposable. Real love doesn't require you to diminish yourself to make others comfortable. Every evening when I sit on this porch watching the sunset, I can almost hear Grandma Eleanor's voice in the wind, proud that I finally understood her lessons about independence and self-worth. The family that told me to disappear learned that when you push someone away, you might discover they were the foundation holding everything together. But I learned something even more valuable. I didn't need their approval to build a beautiful life. What would you have done in my situation? Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and self-respect? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that like button if this story resonated with you. Subscribe for more stories about finding strength in difficult situations, and share this with anyone who might need to hear that they deserve to be valued, not just used. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is love yourself enough to walk away from people who don't appreciate your worth. I hope your own journey leads you to people who celebrate you for exactly who you are.